This is the second of two talks that I, Guy Newland, am giving on grief and Buddhist practice. And just like to quickly say that the sources for this particular talk are the commentary on the Therigatha story of Kisagotami, along with my own personal experiences in dealing with grief, and then things that other people have shared with me, especially recently, as I've been talking about my experiences. So, one of the things that we know is that the Buddha was not a god in the sky who issued a commandment, "Thou shalt not grasp," or "Thou shalt not cling," as the case may be. Rather, he was a teacher who was gently but persistently trying to guide us to give up the futile attempts to hold on to something that can't be grasped, like holding the wind, to grabbing the wind or something like that, because everything that is dear and precious to us keeps changing and flowing away and flowing. And so it's helpful for us, as I was talking about yesterday, to try to accustom ourselves to this reality, to be more in touch with this reality, so that we can use the hours and minutes of our life, which we don't really know how many are left, to try to bring happiness to others in the most meaningful way we can. And also so that we can be better prepared ourselves for dealing with the inevitable separation from the people we love and our own death in this lifetime. But today I want to talk more about a situation where someone that is a friend of ours, someone that we know, is afflicted by serious grief or trauma, so that it's disrupting their mind and, for a while at least, their ability to function in a normal way. And we have a model on this, which is, it would be nice if it were a much longer story, but we have a model of Kisagotami, who, to just get to the point of the story, was very attached to a young child. And unfortunately, this child died, and she was crazed with grief and carried the corpse door to door through the town. And we can assume that the corpse was in progressively worse condition as she did this, and people reviled her. They turned her away. They didn't want her coming anywhere near them, right? There was a strong, to say aversion is understating it, right? And so one wise man said, well, maybe the Buddha can help you. And when she went to see the Buddha, he didn't turn her away, but he stopped and listened to her. And then the text says, seeing her situation, quote unquote. That is, he saw. He didn't just listen. He listened well and looked into her heart, and saw what was really happening with her. And then skillfully, he didn't expound to her the doctrine of impermanence. Instead, he sent her to get a mustard seed from a house where no one had ever died, which in her state of mind she thought might be possible, and she went out to try to do it. And going door to door, she met face to face person after person who had also suffered grief, each one with their own loss, their own pain, and their own story, right? And this was transformative. This is what healed her. And she went back to the Buddha and told the Buddha that he had restored her. And then he taught her the Dharma about impermanence. And I couldn't help but comparing this to the Mahaparinibbana Sutta that we looked at yesterday, where as soon as a question came up about separating from someone you love by death, Buddha immediately explained quite clearly to Ananda the doctrine of impermanence. But of course, Ananda was in his right mind and well established in the practice. He wasn't liberated, but he'd been with Buddha for a long time. Apparently, this woman had, Kisa Gotami had a connection with the Dharma from about 100,000 eons before. and so the idea, she wasn't well established, at least in this lifetime or any recent lifetime. And so the Buddha took a different approach. Okay, so that's our model. Now what I'm going to try to do is say, looking at that and looking at my own experience, what are my suggestions up to now in terms of, you know, what I think could be helpful in this situation. First of all, I think it's very important to set our motivation carefully and critically before we try to get involved in a situation like this, because a lot of people will do something to help themselves feel that they're a good person. And that's not the right motivation to be most helpful. And other people do it really, I think, maybe subconsciously because they want to be admired. Like if they go, you know, but it's not really coming from a sincere heart. So, you know, to the degree we're susceptible to these kinds of things, people feeling that it's just socially obligatory, try to get deeper than that and start from a place of really caring for the other person. And then, to the degree that's appropriate to the relationship and the context, you know, try to make a contact with the person, not just saying, how are you when you accidentally see them in the grocery store, but finding some way to connect with people that gives them a chance, you know. That is, like in the story of Kisa Gotami, not turning away. A lot of people look at the recently bereaved as contaminated. And that contamination is not actually germs, it's fear, right? And these people, they cannot see these people without being reminded of something they very much don't want to think of. And so people turn away, and that's the first thing is that we can do after we set our motivation is not turn away. And then try to see the situation as Buddha did, which is difficult for us because we're not omniscient. Or clairvoyant even, and so it's hard. But I was thinking that, you know, if you can gently ask the person questions like, how is this going for you, and see what kind of the problem with how are you is that it just sounds like you don't really, depending on how you say it, could sound like you're not really interested. But so you have to approach the person with some kind of way that communicates to them that you have a genuine interest and care about them. And then listen well to whatever they say and empathize. Try to be there with them. Now, they may not want to talk to you. That's very likely, depending on, you know, the relationship and where they are in their grief. But another possibility is to, you know, have them talk to somebody else who's a veteran of the particular kind of grief they have. You know, if a veterans group for combat or sexual assault victims group or their, you know, grief groups and so forth. So I know that, you know, when I was sort of this was very fresh and raw for me, I went through a phase where I didn't really want to talk to anybody except people in my family or people who had lost their spouse, which seemed quite crazy. I'm just telling you that's the way my mind was at that time. And so that could be a way to go if you can find somebody else, you know, or from your own life, speak from that kind of position. And then, of course, also if you can get the person together with a skilled, compassionate therapist or spiritual mentor, you know, who can listen to their story. There's a lot of evidence that, you know, people they don't necessarily want to tell these stories, but if they tell the story and then they tell it and they tell it over again, that's very restorative. Now, one of the latest things that I've discovered that we can do, and I've just discovered because people have done it to me, is we can ask them to help in some way. Not right immediately, but the timing is important. But, you know, 6 weeks later or whatever, you give them something that's not too hard to do and would give them a sense of really benefiting somebody else. This seems like one of the very best things, and I've found that it's been really helpful to me, you know, to do things to help other people in a variety of ways, even before I came out here, but including this, it's very helpful. Unless the person is a serious Dharma practitioner, or they ask you, this might not be the optimal time to start talking about death and impermanence. Not that it isn't completely true, but we have to consider among all the true things, what's the most skillful thing to talk about it. And we might be anxious and then just reflexively go to what comes to our mind, which is these teachings, which the Buddha, as we saw, waited a little while to break out. And then the last thing, which I actually got from Venerable Chodron by email talking about these things, was that we have to recognize that as much as we're not Buddhas, we're going to make mistakes. We can't read people's minds. We do the best we can, and when we don't succeed, we try to understand what we've done wrong, and we try to do better. So I think that to continuously direct our minds in an intentional way to trying to become more effective helpers of our fellow sentient beings, that this is the practice of bodhisattvas. Yeah. Thank you.